Welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, that's right, another exciting episode. Let me tell you about today's show. I looked at this beautiful woman's bio and was like, she's in the wrong field. She should be up there with Miss Harris, the former vice president. So evidently, we're going to try to figure out how to get this resume over to the political party and let them look at it, because this is crazy. But not only is it crazy, it's crazy because all of the things that this woman is doing for her community, and not only for the community, because I believe in the ripple effect. It's going to affect everybody. That's why we have these platforms to amplify what individuals are doing, that beast mindset. Today on the show, all the way from Colorado, I want to welcome the one, the only. I got to give her a better introduction. The future of her city, the future of the ripple effect, the one, the only, Miss Monica Badgett. Welcome to the show, Monica.
Thank you so much. How are you this morning and afternoon?
I am doing great. Every day is a great day for me. Every day is a great day, especially when I have great guests like yourself coming on the show and telling your story and making a difference, not only in your community but to the world. Before we get started, tell the viewers a little bit about who Monica Badgett actually is.
Wow, that could be a loaded question, but let's see. I'm born and raised here in Denver. Um, Graduated native girl. Just grew up in the city. Love my state. Love my city. Graduated from Wilberforce University, which is the first historical Black-owned, Black-operated HBCU in Wilberforce, Ohio, founded in 1856. Little HBCU plug. Uh, Graduated there, did my graduate work at CSU Global, and literally just took just my passion in being able to serve into different capacities. And so I have always done community service, always don't look at it as a job. It's literally the thing that kind of fills my heart tank, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Just a woman of faith who loves kids. I'm an author, I'm a poet. Just love to be able to serve in different capacities, especially being able to be a voice for marginalized communities and for people who happen to have a lived experience that is often ignored, but often is silenced because of the fear of what that looks like, the fear of what it sounds like, and how sometimes and oftentimes those spaces are closed to them. And so being able to really just kind of get in and use that, the niche of just saying, you know what, not only am I a Black mama, which I am, not only am I a Black woman, but I am. Not only that I can conjugate a few verbs and I speak pretty well, not even those things, but being able to look at what have the people who have gone before me, what have they sown, what have they given, what have they sacrificed, that I can be able to take those very things and give them back into every way in any way possible. And so that's what I have spent my work doing, whether it's working with nonprofit organizations on the other end, but also as a small business owner saying, hey, if I'm going in, what do I need to do to help you to do this better? What can I do to help you to see what you can't see? And so those things are multi-tiered, but in between those that it's woven, it's always service.
You know, it's funny. We live in the digital age, the blueprint digital age. I remember
Absolutely.
telling my daughter, you guys have such great opportunities. And she was like, what do you mean? I like, when I grew up, the closest you had was a phone. You had to have permission and you call people in your surroundings. So I'm telling you where I'm going with this. So we all studied history. We all studied geography. I know nothing of Denver. So let me show you where I'm going with this. It may sound a little ignorant to people when I say this. I wasn't aware of the minority population in Denver. I don't know what it's like to be a minority in Denver. You know, get where I'm going? Take,
Mm-hmm.
take me down that road. What is it like now? I mean, now it's different because of the internet. But what I'm saying is, in my day, in the 80s, all the way up to the 90s, unless you was in the military or you traveled, you didn't know nothing about
Right.
other
Right.
destinations and people's lifestyle, how they live. We hear it when we heard like when the rap game came out and you West Side Compton and LL Cool
Right.
J in New York. That you heard it through the music, but unless you visited, you didn't know nothing about it. What was it like growing up for you in Colorado?
I think that what's interesting is that people don't know a lot of Black history literally rests in the state of Colorado. One of the first Black settlements was Deerfield,
Okay.
where Black folks who literally had migrated from the South and settled like they did in Rosewood, how they did and so they settled in Black settlements
Mm.
because they knew that if we can get to the West from the South, we'll be okay. And what other people also don't know is that Denver itself was there's a Black business district that has now been since gentrified, which is a whole nother conversation.
Okay.
That used to be called the Harlem of the West. It was 5 points. Um, your jazz artists would come, and it was this literally, it's just 5 streets that meet in the middle of the city, in the middle of our community. And this is where Black businesses flourished. And we have the largest, people don't know, Denver has one of the largest Juneteenth celebrations in the country outside of Texas.
I
People
didn't know
don't know
that.
that.
Yeah, I didn't know.
We have there's multiple levels of celebration of culture that are here, and it's because of those who come before us. When I grew up in a very Black community, right in the middle of what we call the East Side, and was not far from downtown, and everything was communal. Everything was communal. It was the same thing and the same Black experience as you have in other cities. Like, you knew the little old women that lived across the street. They knew that you weren't supposed to be outside if your mama wasn't home. What you doing outside? These are the things you have. So you had those community check marks. But you also had, during the time that I grew up, you also had hood dudes. You had real hood dudes that if they knew that you had, and hood chicks who knew that if you had potential, they not gonna let you get into no mess. Like, why you over here? You a schoolgirl, what you doing over here? Or you a school dude, you got potential, what the hell you doing over here? And they would hold other jokers and other wannabe gangsters who was trying to get you caught up, they would hold them accountable. Don't mess with them. Don't let me see you talking to them. Why you over here? You about to go to college. You're about to do this. You have a future. You don't want this. And so I think that it was another level of checks and balances that we often have in other communities as well throughout our lived Black experience.
Mm.
But I think that the beautiful thing about here is that even in the changes and the shifts, you have Black folk who come here and they relocate, like you mentioned before, just in terms of location from the military. We have multiple military bases here in the city, or we did. We had Fitzsimmons, and then we had Laurie, and then those bases closed down. We had first Black mayor, Mayor Wellington Webb. We had our second Black mayor, Michael B. Hancock, who I ended up, he's been my big brother, and we went to high school together. And so when you look at those kind of leaders and things that are formed within the community, they come from community. They come from those lived experiences, and they see those things. And so they have a different viewpoint of exactly how things need to pivot and how things need to move. And so when you're growing up, you see people and they grow up in these spaces. And so the spaces we went to, my high school, black neighborhood, predominantly Black neighborhood, but we had what was called almost like a review of reverse busing. So our school was literally 51% Black, 41% white. And then we had like Latino and Black folk, like we were right in the middle because this is our community. And so these are folks who, my white folks, white friends who lived across town, who were bussed in to go to school here, who we literally some 35 plus years later are still very good friends. We talk about these things, especially in terms of this previous fiasco that we call an election. We had those conversations, and those hard to have conversations about race and the context of race and what does that look like and how does that look like for us and how can we move the needle. And even though we have these relationships, this might not be for everybody. What do we need to do? And so I think that there has been such a dynamic between the groups that when I grew up, you knew who the groups were, but there was almost like a collaboration between the groups where, well, that's them folk over there, but guess what? They over here, we did this, but we were also very protective of our spaces, which I think that was probably the most important. You needed to understand that the collective space was protected and important enough because we need to make sure that everybody has access to this in our community. So it doesn't mean y'all can't come play with us, but you're not going to come into the kitchen and start cooking. You can sit outside, you can get a plate, right? So that lived experience was different because we have Black folks who grew up in the city, who are from here, who either went to school out of state and came here. And they became a part of that changing of the guard. They were first Black women and Black men who sat on school boards or on city councils, who owned blocks and blocks of land on purpose in Black communities in order to help to fortify the Black experience. So when you're thinking about that, it's important.
How difficult, didn't mean to cut you off. How difficult was, two-part question, how difficult was the change to happen in Denver? And then second of all, you mentioned a key historical moment in time, Rosewood. I know you talked to your ancestors. Were they ever afraid of the Rosewood incident taking place in Denver? You're taking me through history because I had no idea about any parts of Denver. I'm sorry. I didn't know, but now I'm being,
and that's okay.
I'm being educated.
That's okay. I love it. You're absolutely right. I think that what has happened, because my parents were originally from Texas, and so they came here in the early 50s. And so about 50, I say 54, 55. And so the fear, the two part, I think that the fear is the fact that you hear something, but you say, but we can't stop moving. We got to keep going. That area now, and in Netherland and in Deerfield, in the mountain areas, by the way, of course, there's no more, but the history still lives and the land still speaks. You have huge collaborations in this area during that time historically between the indigenous people of the land and African Black folk who had migrated. So you're looking at that piece. In Denver, things began to change when you started to see, I remember the first time when I realized that there was going to be change was happening. It's probably in like 1991. And I saw it was a little brick bungalow. It was just like, like a Saturday afternoon, go to our Black bookstore, go to another little place, which was called the Kente Express, which is still here, where you could get your oils, you could get your Kente cloth, where there's a little man upstairs who would make you pillowcases and whatever. And there was Kente they would bring from all over the country, all over the continent. You could buy oils and scrape rubs, and it's everything. It was like the most beautiful experience. Right next to it was a Black bookstore. You go in, there were like Black authors who would come and they would have readings for their books. And then I would go down to Miss Betty's and go get a bean pie, right? So it was all of those things that were smack them in the community. So now when I'm looking, because gentrification is another level, you have a lot of those Black businesses that got pushed out. You had white proprietors, or sometimes what I call Black adjacent folk, who would come in and purchase this, sell it to the highest bidder. And then Black proprietors and those little shopettes and things that you grew up on got pushed out. And you begin to see even now the system and the change. And so when I saw this little bungalow, and this at the time in like 91, and I was walking and I looked and it said a sale sign in the yard. And it said sale price, I never forget it, $181,000. And I knew then, I said, something is happening. Wow. Something is happening. And it started to shift. And so those kind of conversations and having conversations with Black folk who moved here either from Louisiana, from Missouri or Missouri or Louisiana, or Black folks who were in Oklahoma and who came here, and talking to a little Black woman who has a beautiful little home in what is in one of our neighborhoods called Park Hill. She said, baby, I bought my house for $12,500. She said, when they wouldn't even you had to have a husband to sign for a loan because women couldn't buy property on their own. And she said, and the fact that I was a Black woman trying to buy property
made it worse.
Was even more made it worse. And so when home buyers like KB Homes and different home were buying up these properties and saying, hey, we have this little piece of land, we're buying this, and we would like to buy your house. She said they wanted to give me $600,000 for my home. She said, why would I give something that is mine, that has been paid for, and my equity is almost $1.2 million? Why would I give it to you? And so it came to be this level of dangling the carrot. I got some money for you. You know you want it. You don't need this house. You need this money.
Mhm.
And watching people sell their souls for 30 pieces of silver. And then realizing that it was a setup because you were building another community into where our old airport was, where one of our gosh, we could get into this and I don't want to extend it, but this is going to be contextually, it makes so much sense. We had our black mayor at the time, and we were closing down an Army base or Air Force base here, and then our new airport was being built, and then the old airport had all this land, and so our then mayor was tagged to be the Secretary of Transportation. It's the first Latino mayor transport Secretary of Transportation, Federico Pena, because of how that was happening. So they left it in the black mayor's hands, and here you go, rock out, make that work. So he was like, how in the hell am I do this? So he turned it into mixed use. So he was going to Philly. He was looking at different states and saying, how are you using mixed use? How are you having people who live here, who can live and work and go to school in the same community? So it's like, wow, this is the perfect opportunity so that teachers and police officers and business owners can live next to each other and still be able to work and go to the grocery store and do these things. And so that was his vision. It was a beautiful vision.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, white folk got the idea, well, we're going to buy up. So they started buying up stuff. And then it was set up in this old land, literally was across the street from Black community, like cross street, literally across the street where our airport was. All of a sudden, you start to see this was completely different than what was across the street, which
Mm.
was fine. But it was almost this idea of, well, we want to put a gate on here. No, you don't get to put a gate on a community that wasn't yours to begin with. And so we started to see how these things began to change and shift. But when I tell you that people started to see, oh, there's money here, but Black folks some were taking property and selling it while white folks saw it and snatched it up and then began to put in what they wanted to in our communities. And it started to change the absolute, um, the landscape of what used to be. And people, well, we want to make it well. No, it's not, because you're the little hat shop, Miss Minerva, you could go down and get your hat made for Sunday. She
Mm.
would make it and she would craft the hat right there. And then you could go to Mr. Joe, who used to fix my shoes from the time I actually was able to wear shoes. I drop them off. He have them piled high. He just look at you, give you a little piece of paper. May have a number on it, but he look at you and he would know, oh, baby, hold on, let me get your shoes. He would go right to it by your face and your shoe. He knew where your shoe was and
Mhm.
would talk to you about the detail of your shoe and how he fixed it and what you'd be able to do with it. And this is what you need to do to make sure you do this. And don't bring this shoe to here me looking like this again. Yes, sir. It was that, and that was removed. And so what that did is that literally removed the heartbeat of our community, where Black folks started to move in and they started to be so spread out that the fragmentation of community was literally almost implemented on purpose. Hopefully that answers the question, but there's so
Mhm.
many layers to it. There's so many dynamic layers to it. And I think that everything that's happening that we're seeing currently in our current climate is a direct reflection of those seeds that were sown early on for the divisiveness and the separation of community and the keeping of communal conversations like this from occurring in safe spaces.
It's funny. We have a mutual friend, Alan Williams, that referred you on
Mm-hmm.
to our show, and he said to you after overhearing the conversation that people need to hear your voice. And I noticed that you have taken the the message of community to amplify it across a bigger platform. Let's call it the nation. What are some of the things that you've done to acknowledge things that need to be addressed in the community, and why?
Wow. Um, Sometimes it's literally just being in the room, being able to be in the room and then asking the question. Often we have people who we want to represent us and they don't understand us. And so they give a false representation of the need and then tell us what we need and don't allow us to be a part of the solution.
Mm.
And so what I try to do and what my heartbeat has always been is to ask the question. And I'm usually like, I'm sorry, I have a question. So if A did C and C did B, then why are we doing D? Then all of a sudden it's that's a great question. Well, that's a great question, but we need an answer because behind that answer needs to be an active action item behind that manifestation of what that's supposed to look like.
Mm.
And so when that happens, being able to be a voice in the room or the question asker literally is the provocation to people, hopefully, people being able to think about what they're thinking about in order for us to really get on a trajectory to where things move the needle. Often when we're trying to move the needle, we get real bogged down for people who don't understand the record player. When there was dust and things on the needle would scratch the record. And so what's happening is that we're using old needles on new records and expecting a new sound. And often that sound is very muted. It's very scratchy because we're not cleaning the needle before we move it. And the cleaning of the needle is literally removing old narratives,
Right.
removing the contextual misunderstanding of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Not having circular conversations anymore. Literally being able to say, okay, this is the conversation we had 5 years ago. We should have had 5 years worth of progress, but we're still repeating and we're arguing about what we did 5 years ago when we have a whole new problem that literally could break the player altogether. And we won't have to worry about a needle because we won't have an arm, we won't have a record, and there'll be no sound.
You teamed
And
up.
so,
Oh, go ahead. Finish it out. Finish it out. Finish it off.
and so with that, being able to be in those spaces and being able to see it literally is, I see a problem, I want to be a part of the solution. What can I speak into this space where I can speak truth to power to be able to help to move it? And if there's people who are already moving the needle for real, how do I get behind them and help to support them to do it? Because I'm not one of those people, friend, real talk, I don't always have to be in the front, and I'm cool with that. Like Kendrick said, I'm fine with it. I'll put the line with it. I don't have to be in the front. But what I do is that I'm going to definitely be the one in the back. And if I need to be in the front, I will. But I'll be in the back to tell you and to give you the guidance and to show you the strategy and be able to say, we did this. This didn't work. Why are we doing this again? Well, we did this. No. Why are we doing this? Let's come up with something different. And if I see you execute it, we're good to go. But it's about being the voice in the space, asking the question, being the willing party to actually be able to help to push the needle, but also to get your feet dirty. And if you get some dirt under your fingernails, wash your hands and we keep it moving.
What are some of the things that is resonating that needs to be moved in your community? And not only in your community, but you see that it's a need worldwide.
Wow. The piece that I think that, especially in my community, that needs to move the needle is that there are so many people who are trying at this time who are trying to fight for the first $5 that you don't understand that we got a bank of 50. So you fighting over $5. Well, we got a whole nother $45 that we can work with and that everybody gets a chance to eat. Mm-hmm. There's people always talk about this crab in a barrel mentality. And I hate that narrative. And that's a very strong word because people don't understand. Crabs know they don't belong in a bucket. Everybody trying to get out. We belong in the water. We belong in the sand. We're not trying to be in no bucket because we know that this bucket, first of all, is containing us, is piling us up on top of each other to make us feel as though you are my enemy because you're on top of me or because you're under me, when we're all trying to get out of the bucket. And so we don't understand that there's people who put us in the bucket. So we don't go after the people who put us in the bucket. We go after each other because we're in the bucket together. Because you always will abuse or hurt people within proximity to you. And this is where people say black on black crime. That's a fallacy. White on white crime. That's a fact. That's you villainize and you hurt people within the proximity in which you live. Mm-hmm. People don't that. And so that's a whole nother discussion, my friend, for a whole nother day.
you
Because we could do that thing for real, for real. But I think that what we look at is that I think that with some Black folk, and uh, there's so much. There's a difference between the fact that we are not a monolith at all, which is fantastic, and it's amazing, and it's wonderful because we're thinkers and we're progressors. And if we did not have multiple thinkers, we would not be able to have multiple tiers of society. But I think that what we have tried to do for so long is that we've tried to be like everybody else for so long that we forgot innately who we were. There was a wonderful author who taught here at the Iowa School of Theology, and he passed some years ago, and which is at the University of Denver. And he wrote a beautiful book called There Is a River. One of the best books written outside of Before the Mayflower, for those who understand about the history of Black folk in this country. And I remember I had read it in my undergrad, and I said, oh, he's at home. I'm going to call him. And Dr. Vincent Harding. And I called him. I said, well, I'm going to see if he's going to call me back. So I'm doing an internship, lost my mind, because he used variations of Black folks. He used Black, Negro, Afro-American, African throughout the course of his book. So I left a message. I said, Dr. Harding, what was the reason behind you using the different variations of Black and colored and Negro and all of that throughout the book? So, I didn't think anything of it. He called me, and I almost lost my mind. He called me, and he said, young sister. And I boohooed. And I said, he goes, to answer, he was very melodic in his voice. And he said, to answer your question, he said, for years, Black folk have allowed other folk to define us, whether we be Black, whether we be colored, whether we be Negro, whether we be African American, Afro-American. He said, we have throughout history have allowed so many people to rename us. We forgot that we have the power to name ourselves.
Yeah.
By the time I got off the phone, I was shook. I was shook. I said, thank you, Dr. Harding. He said, you're welcome. He said, maybe sometime you and I and my wife can get together and we can have lunch. And that's when I really lost my mind. Wow. But it's those kinds of conversations that made so much sense to me. We have tried and pushed the envelope so hard to now, well, I'm not African, I'm American. Negro, let me help you. If you take corn and you plant it here, does it stop being corn? No, it's still corn. So we try so hard to dismantle the connection that we have to the continent. That we're literally dismantling the connection that we have toward one another. And so I always think about this one line in one of my favorite movies, which is School Days. And Dap is talking to the administrator who's telling him to stop doing the South African protests on campus at Mission College. And he says to him, and it's just a real quick word, Dap says, Black folk are catching hell all over the world, And when he said that, it was the connection between, it's not just the Black folks here at Mission College, and it's not just about us protesting you all not divesting in South Africa. I remember during those times that I was one of those students who was doing that. But I remember that literally said, I can't disconnect myself from the campus because I'm Black here. But there are Black folks all over the diaspora who are struggling and fighting for their very survival. And we don't understand that. We have lost sight of the fact that the motherland was raped and her children were scattered all over the earth. There are Africans that sit and that are the oldest, one of the oldest people in the mountains of China are the oldest Africans who literally came from Africa. And they're one of the oldest generations of Chinese that live in the mountains, and they're African. They're African. And we fail to understand that once we don't understand that our struggle is not just geographical, but it is a collective struggle with multiple tiers of misunderstanding. As we begin to try to believe that the proximity to whiteness is the proximity to success, we have lost the vision. And when we don't fail to understand that my success as a Black woman should not overshadow or marginalize and or emasculate you because you're a Black man who's doing good things. In the matter of fact, the fact when you do better, it helps me to do better because now I am fortified to build up, to be an additional voice because I know I have your protection and your guarding.
Why
But
do
when
you
we fail
think?
to understand, we get it lost.
Look, I can feel that passion just coming all through the television right now. Why do
Ah,
you why do you think? And let me clarify something for the listeners. This isn't necessarily a show about blackness. This is
mm-mm,
this is this is about culture, and culture means everybody. So
agree.
I'm gonna phrase this to you. Why do you think culture culture has the word culture has failed not only our culture, but all the other cultures? Why do you think this has happened?
I, what it happens is that we forget the one thing is that we forget that we are all human.
Okay.
And once we forget that we all are human and we have human experiences, but sometimes our ethnicity and the cultures in which we come from create different experiences based on constructs that have been created for us to be able to operate and live in.
Hmm.
We have, when we fail to understand that, we start to believe that having conversations about the things that make us uncomfortable create more of the problem when it literally is fortifying the solution.
Hmm.
If when we see of a culture that now has birthed discord as the first line of defense,
Right.
rather than saying, we can agree to disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable. And that's okay. But still being able to have lines in the sand of the things that can be disagreeable. Violence against women, that should be a line for everybody in the sand because that's violence against children.
Mhm.
That's violence against generations. When that means that there is the brutalities of people, not just in marginalized communities, but within cultures, whether it be poor white folk, whether it be poor Black folk, whether it be Latinos, whether it be my Asian Pacific Islander brothers and sisters, that struggle. The beauty is that when I look at this, I was the co-chair and of what we have here was the Denver African American Commission, which is a commission that is actually appointed by the mayor, voted on by city council, and you serve. So I just finished my tenure, my 6-year tenure in September. We had this beautiful piece called Commission Partnership Day. And I'll mind you, these are all commissions that are through the city and county of Denver. And within that commission, that partnership day, you have people coming from various commissions. And we come together and we talk about what are the things that our community is saying that is the need that's being overseen, that is being ignored. And when I tell you, when you're sitting with the LGBTQ commission, you're sitting with the African American commission, you're sitting with the Women's Commission, you're sitting with the Asian Pacific Islander Commission. And we're starting to talk about these are the things that are happening in the communities that are the same.
Hmm.
We're talking about older Asian Pacific Islander elders who don't trust police. They don't have those conversations though, right? Because they're isolated within the context of culture and within the culture they've created of safety in their communities that they don't have to ask for anything outside. So when you're looking at these dynamics and we came together building a lateral team and saying, this is the issues that we have across the board that are the same for all of us,
Hmm.
that are the same for all of us. The lack of resources, the same for all of us. We got together as a collaborative and said, hey, Mr. Mayor, these are the issues and these are the things that we wanted to present to you as suggestions because these are what the community is feeling. So there's a line in with Kendrick Lamar. He said, "I want the culture's feeling." When we have these things that we're literally being able to say, "I feel this," because it's the reverb that's bouncing off of people. You can feel it.
Hmm.
Now, when you're looking in the face of people, there is such a level of brokenness and such a level of disconnect because the severing of separations have been so like water drops. It's like waterboarding. If I drop a water on a rock long enough, it'll wear the rock thin. And that is what has happened. But rather than us finding and identifying where the leak is coming from, we blame the rock.
Where do you think the leak is actually coming from? And me and you talked off camera, and we definitely gonna have you come back and share in some more in-depth conversation. We use I shared with you the situation is the Bacon Rebellion, which we'll talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that if you begin to understand that we all have a common thread when it comes to community. And when I look
Mm-hmm.
at community for what it really was, where we were all in a melting pot together, where we all shared the same resources, we all worked together. A prime example would be the Bacon Rebellion. But you ask yourself, as a community involvement leader, and you deal with the different individual races, and you realize that they all have a common thread and a common policy. Why haven't something been done to address these things worldwide from your viewpoint? And let me rephrase this, people. This is her viewpoint. And a lot of times you have to just sit back and really be willing to listen and sit back, and not saying everybody's going to have the solution, but
Right.
this is what you do. You are a community involvement, and you've been in your community since the day you was born. But why you think none of it has been really addressed? Is it a fear
It's
factor,
because
a fear base?
oh, absolutely. I think that anything that is based and rooted in fear prevents us from moving forward in any direction. Whether it be the fact that it helps us to be stabilized in the places that we're in because it's safer, it makes more sense because we're familiar, right? The things that make that we're familiar with, we become less apt to feel that we need to move unless it's a force. I think one of the pieces that makes it so hard is that we have tried to legislate human behavior. We have tried to legislate kindness and generosity. And so the beauty is that I love the fact that we have different matters of opinion. That's wonderful. But I shouldn't have to have legislation to tell you that this would hurt. I shouldn't have to have legislation that says if you do this and take children out of abusive homes and put them into foster care where they're furtherly where there's a further level of abuse, that it won't impact them as adults. I shouldn't have to tell you that if a child doesn't eat and lives in a community where there are food deserts, that if they go to school they're not going to be able to focus. I shouldn't have to repeat that to you. You should be able to say that if this child is being abused at home, their behavior at school is going to resonate what is happening in the household. They may become a bully. They may do those things. And so I think that we don't stop long enough to listen. We're listening to respond instead of listening to hear. And we're listening, and sometimes we're hearing with the wrong piece. We're listening here, but we're not listening with our hearts. We're not listening with a pure intent to be able to say, I hear you. I see you. What can I do to support you?
Mm.
And when that happens, it changes the trajectory of folk. And guess what? My grandmama always used to say, everybody laughing ain't happy and everybody grinning ain't glad. And it's the truth.
Mm.
Everybody laughing in front of me ain't necessarily on my side, and everybody grinning in my face ain't necessarily for my success. But if I understand that if I'm moving in that way, that the draw should be that the provocation of my behavior and how I am responding and operating in a space should be able to resonate with you and be like, you know what? I was probably out of order when I did that. Because when we take accountability for us, it opens up the door for other people to have accountability for them. But if you are constantly telling people that they don't have to be accountable to nothing and nobody, no given time, you ain't got to say, I'm sorry, you don't have to do this, you are literally perpetuating more bad behavior. And it begins to say, hey, somebody gave me this, I can do this. They told me I can do this, I can do this. And the thing that the piece that is the most detrimental and the most painful is when I hear folks say, well, I'm grown. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Being grown means that you have choices.
Mm.
Being grown means that you look at consequences, whether good, bad, or ugly, or indifferent. Being grown does not give you the excuse to do whatever the hell you want to whoever the hell you want with no accountability.
Mm.
And those things are painful. Those things are painful when we got to look at ourselves and say, I missed it on this one. I jacked this up. I don't ever want to do this again. And then you use that experience to make sure that other people understand the story so that they don't repeat the thing. But I can't stop you, because you
Right.
want to be, if you want to do that, you're going to use your free will and you're going to do it. But if we begin to really understand that the person who lives next door to me is not my enemy,
Mm.
with the first thought, talking to your neighbor wouldn't be hard. I saw a video the other day, which was so wonderful. It's in Deerfield, Michigan, which has the largest Muslim population in the country.
Mm.
And this white old elderly white lady had a Muslim neighbor, went over and asked her. She said, I really have a question for you, and I don't want to be disrespectful. I'm going to the mosque. I'm going to a Muslim funeral, and I need a head covering, but I need to know how to wrap it. This Muslim woman said, no problem. I can give you, gave her the scarf. She goes, well, which way should I wrap it? She said, you can have the scarf. She said, I've got plenty of them. Gave this white lady the scarf. She said, well, I'll tell you what, while we're standing here, this is in the video. She said, show me how, she said, you can try to tie it while you're in front of me so I can show you how to do it.
Mm.
The courage that it took for that neighbor to go and ask, and then the courage for the Muslim woman not to be fearful, but to be able to say, how am I going to embrace this neighbor and say, I'm going to show you how to tie a scarf.
Mm.
The woman went out, she goes, thank you so much. She says, thank you so much. She goes, I just want to be respectful, but I knew that I could ask you. Again, it's a safe space. It's not wrong to ask the question. It's wrong to assume that you know the answer and start acting off of your own understanding. That's the problem. The problem isn't asking the question. And
You
in that moment, it created a nuance of communication and understanding for both of those neighbors that was probably has far extended beyond just, hey neighbor, how you doing and good morning.
you've done all kind of extraordinary things for your community. What are some of the things that you have implemented that has truly impact your community where you can actually see some type of growth and development?
Oh wow. I think that one those pieces that are, there's so many layers to that, friend. I I earnestly believe that being a part of groups where women are giving voice to community, I think are the most powerful. And community doesn't just mean, girl, you bad, you strong, you wonderful. No, that means being able to give space to sitting and having conversations in wellness spaces, um, and being able to have spaces to where Black folk can talk about brokenness. What does that look like for us? Being able to engage people in that way. And I think that there's so many different layers that I look and talk about in terms of those successes. The success of being able to see change within the school district that my daughter attends and sitting on the Voices of Color, which literally is embracing multiple tiers of marginalized groups of people within a district that literally has about 55,000 students, um, of various backgrounds, of various ethnicities, of various countries, of babies who are immigrants or first generation, second generation. Um, Being able to see their parents breathe when they say, can I come into this space? Because you see sometimes Black women facilitating these conversations, and to have women who are Asian Indian and Muslim
Mhm.
and African and white to say, can I come into the space? I'm a mom of a Black child. Absolutely. Because you need to understand, or I'm a teacher, or seeing having principals and school leaders in these spaces and saying, I'm trying to help my staff understand how we need to pivot as it's feeding into the conversation with students and how we're talking to them in this. Would you mind having these conversations with them? So literally being able, as I mentioned before early in our conversation, being able to be a voice of asking the question helps to stem people to ask the questions themselves, but literally helping that door to be pushed open for additional conversation so that we can move the needle. And I think that everything that I've tried to do in community, whether it be through the beautiful philanthropy group spin that I'm a part of, or being a commissioner for the Denver African American Commission, or being a co-chair for Voices of Color within the Cherry Creek School District, or being able to be a mom, or being a poet, or being an author, or sitting on panels for mental health. Those things are crucial in being able to see people in spaces, whether it be big, small, or indifferent, and being able to say, you gave me power to open my mouth. And I'm watching people open businesses because their mouths were open. I'm watching people being able to leave abusive relationships because we gave them voice and space. Watching people do simple things, friend, like actually calling a therapist and making an appointment and going every week and watching them grow and progress. Watching young women that I've mentored in terms of my own baby, watching them be mentored and then say, Miss Monica, I remember when you told me this. I remember I had a student who was bipolar, white male, bipolar, had an autistic son, did not want to take his medication because it would prevent him from taking care of his son. And I told him face to face, I said, let me tell you something. I said, baby, where your life is right now, a year from now, it won't look like this. He said, but Miss Monica, it don't feel like that. I said, baby, it won't. Talking to him, again, when we were talking about conversations and building culture and being able to identify fear in culture or cultural references, he said that Black women had always been a voice of power and help and healing for him. So when I walked into the classroom, he said it was something that he said, I trusted you. When I saw you, I trusted you. And that also comes from my walk and my belief and my faith in God. I just believe that if I'm a vessel and you're going to use me, then okay. I don't like this, but okay. But if I can be the presence of that in that space to where you can see that God's love is real and it's authentic and it's true and it meets you where you are, then that's okay. When I tell you that young man, his baby was at a daycare that did not work with autistic children, but Big Mom was gonna say, baby, go ahead, bring that baby in here. We're gonna take care of him. He all right. He said, Miss Monica, they love my baby so much he didn't want to leave daycare to come home. But when I watched him to do this and transform, his whole life transformed after that. And he would follow me in classes that I taught because he said, whatever this woman tells you to do, do it. She saved my life.
You are a author. Tell me a little bit about the book before we wrap up, and what was the reason behind the book?
The book is called Collections of a Brown Girl, and so we're in a reprint right now and doing some other things with some publishing pieces. And it really was just my journey as a Black girl, as a brown girl, in that collection, being able to really give voice to my life experience, whether it be life through love, life and love, loss, love gain, revolution, growth, how I see things, the inner me fighting the inner me, the battles of winning and losing and then winning again, and just giving the story of this collection of this brown girl in her journey through life, whether that looks like the life through being a mom, or life through being a caregiver, or life through being a worker bee, or life through being a world changer, or even the life of being somebody who has been given a mantle to walk into spaces and to speak life and not wanting to because your life feels like it's falling apart. Those real honest, earnest conversations that you have with you, that I wanted to share with others so that they could be able to see that you too have a story. And when I talk to young authors, I do the same thing. I said, you have a story. You don't have to be a certain age to be able to tell a story.
What's the most impactful part of your book that when you think about what you created with the book, what's the one passage or the one memorable moment in your book that you always go back to?
I think it's the places that I remember of when I wrote those poems, where I was. And I can remember each place that I was in my life or in a place that was there. But I remember there's a piece that I have that's called Queen's Rage. Mm-hmm. And it just makes the reference of Sojourner fighting for truth, sitting with Angela and Coretta as they sip tea and talk about the revolution. Mm-hmm. Literally, those things that talk about the trajectory of Black women as they transcend through history and how that rests in my chest. And how does that revolution look like to me? And that I can be a queen, but I can also be raging, and that my rage does not always have to be anger, but it's the rage that I can be able to see when I don't see people living and being the best selves that they can be in a space, regardless of who they are. But that rage is fortified and it's built up by the love that I have to give it and to serve it, and how that makes itself be made manifest in how I move in that.
That's crazy. How can the viewers reach out to you for for support to get your book? I know you're doing a re-marketing with the book, but how can the viewers reach out to you and get more information?
Well, you can actually, we're working on our website right now, but I will leave that with you, and you can just go to www.monicabadgett.com, and you can just leave me a message, and then we'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and send that communication out. Or you can just go ahead and send it to mobyauthor2 at outlook.com for any communication questions, all that good stuff.
Look, I can hear your phone. You're busy. You're like you're, you're
That
probably
ain't nothing but the thing telling me that it's time to eat. That's all.
Monica. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share such a great
Thank
story
you.
of your life and a resource for the people not only in your state in Colorado but throughout the world. Definitely making a difference. We want you to come back and share even more information um, to the viewers if you want to. We would love to have you come back. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton show.